Now, we have a great in-studio guest for you guys, a guy we've been meaning to talk to for a while. Matt Ho, he is a former Marine Corps captain, served in Iraq a couple of times, and then he was a Foreign Service official in Afghanistan until he resigned over our policy in Afghanistan. Matt, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We really appreciate you coming on. So, Matt, first, tell us what you were doing in Afghanistan.
Sure. I was with the State Department. I was a Foreign Service officer. I was assigned there as a political officer, and in that role I served in two separate parts of the country, one in the east along the Pakistan border, and then one in the south, again along the Pakistan border. My job was to be a political advisor, and in that I worked closely with the Afghan government officials in terms of fighting the Taliban insurgency.
That's interesting. And when you went to Afghanistan, did you believe that we could turn it around and that we could win this war and that we can leave, I suppose, Afghanistan relatively stable, et cetera?
Yeah, I think I did. I was confused about it. I had a lot of concerns about it. I had several friends and many colleagues who had served there before. I had done a lot of studying of it, read the history, and so my views weren't clear on how I felt about Afghanistan. However, this is what I did. This was my career, and I wanted to continue to contribute and continue to serve my country, so went to Afghanistan.
And what did you learn there that made you change your mind about our policy there?
What became very clear to me very quickly was that the people who are fighting us, the guys who are killing our troops, are fighting us for the most part because we're occupying them. What also became very clear to me is that there's an ongoing civil war. The civil war that was going on in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, that didn't end in 2001 when America and NATO invaded Afghanistan. It's still going on. And all we're doing is supporting one side in that civil war.
So I think a lot of people are unsure what that civil war is.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What do you mean when you say civil war?
It's complex. I think most of us think of civil war, we think of North versus South. This is much more complex, much more convoluted. But really what it comes down to is you have, within the Pashtun society, you have an urban, educated, secular class. And then you also have a very rural, very poor, very traditional religious class. And that's where you have this split. And on top of that, you then have ethnic divides between the Pashtuns and the Tajiks and Uzbeks. So those are the sides we're talking about.
So that's where it gets really complicated, because when you say civil war, you're mainly referring to the locals that are poorer versus the educated, more urban guys, right? But then when you add in the element of the different ethnicities, then I begin to lose track of who's on what side. So do we know? I mean, are we fighting Tajiks somewhere and Uzbeks somewhere else, or are they on our side? Are the urban guys on our side, and we're not entirely sure?
For the most part, the urban guys are on our side. The Tajiks and Uzbeks form the bulk of the security forces. What you had in 2000.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes. What we had in 2001, or what you had in 2001 Afghanistan, you had the Taliban government, and then you had the Northern Alliance, which was composed mainly of Tajiks and Uzbeks. We overthrew the Taliban government and basically put the Tajik and Uzbek government in power. Karzai flits in between those two different camps.
But Karzai is Pashtun,
Yes.
and the Taliban is mainly Pashtun. Is that correct?
Yes, the Taliban is all Pashtun.
All Pashtun.
But what you have again is you got that split within Pashtun society between the urban sect, an urban sect, and in a rural sect. And what you had happen in the 70s and 80s, you had this urban, progressive, secular class try and modernize Afghanistan, and that's where the roots of the rebellion, that's where the revolt came from, because they were trying to change a way of life. They did things like education reform. Well, education threatens the mullahs and the religious establishment's power base. So they did not want to see that at all, so they rallied the rural people to be against the government. And you had just other issues like that, too.
So it's fascinating, though, because Karzai, in the voting, as fraudulent as it was supported by the Pashtuns. So, and then the northern ethnicities mainly went to his opponent, Abdullah, because he's, if I've got this right, he's from that area. So it's a weird situation where the Pashtun leader is getting Pashtun votes, but his army is actually Uzbek and Tajik.
And you know, to make this even more complicated, Abdullah is actually half Pashtun.
Right.
I mean, it's very complex. Nothing's clear. The deal, though, is that Karzai did get a significant support from the Pashtuns. He got some support from the Tajiks and Uzbeks as well. He did a very good job coalition building. He brought in General Dastum, who's an Uzbek, who's also a war criminal.
In Afghanistan, who isn't?
But that's another aspect of this. Do we want our young men and women fighting and dying over there to prop up a corrupt and illegitimate regime?
But Matt, so let me go to that though. But if he's doing good coalition building and he's brought in all these people, and it appears that even though the election is fraudulent, that if they had a real election, he probably would have won anyway, right? Based on the ethnic split, etc. And correct me anywhere I'm wrong, okay? Then can we say, well, look, he is roughly representative of the people. Good enough.
The turnout was so low in parts of the South, where the bulk of the Pashtuns are, where the bulk of the fighting is, where this insurgency is taking place. You can consider it almost a boycott. In the province I was in, you had roughly 10% voter turnout. I mean, so you rightly can claim that the Pashtuns didn't vote, or a good portion of the Pashtun society did not vote in this election, that they boycotted it.
Would you consider that election completely useless? Like you wouldn't look at the results at all? Or do you think, well, I know there was like 1 million bad votes, which is ridiculous, right? Especially because there aren't that many votes to begin with. But it gives us a sense of who probably would have won. I mean, where do you fall on that? Is it out of those two options?
Yeah, I would go with the first one, the useless one.
Totally useless.
Totally useless. Totally useless.
Right.
It just was so fraudulent. It had such low voter turnout in places, and it only did was serve Karzai's re-election. Totally useless. And now you've got Karzai there for 5 more years.
So now we see the story, Matt, of the CIA secretly supporting Karzai's brother, who is, by all accounts, apparently one of the biggest drug lords in the country, right? And then he's telling the CIA, oh, yeah, that guy's totally Taliban. Yeah, take him out because he's his rival in the drug industry, okay, in the drug trade. That's disastrous, right? But how much, you were there, and I don't know if you know all the answers, of course, but how much do you think that Karzai is in league with his brother and cannot be trusted at all, or, God, I got this meddlesome brother, and he's a world of trouble, but really I'm not really listening to him?
Again, the former, the first one. No, it's his brother. It's a tight family. The idea that this guy is just like you said, a meddlesome, troublesome younger brother who keeps causing problems. No, this is there's a very serious connection there. And also tell you, but you see the people that Karzai's brought into his government, like Marshal Fahim, who's that guy. These are not guys who are just selling a couple bags of pot. These guys are trafficking tons of heroin. These are serious drug lords. And Karzai and most of that government is complicit in it.
So Matt, we're talking to Matt Ho. He was serving as a diplomat for the State Department in Afghanistan when he resigned and said we're not going in the right direction here. Let me challenge you a little bit more on this because, my proclivity, I'm very secular. Okay, and I am very, very concerned about extremist Islam. Now, I was born Muslim, so I don't have a thing against Muslims, obviously, right? But extremist Islam is a real concern throughout the world, and especially in Afghanistan. So I want the urban guys in Afghanistan to win, right? So I think, is there any chance that if we supported them, and we did it right, not just through the military, but we built schools, we built hospital, we built literally bridges, right, et cetera, that we could help them to win that conflict and then make Afghanistan so much better for the whole population, especially the ones that are being suffocated by the mullahs in the south.
Sure. We're doing that right now. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on roads, on bridges, and schools. I think it's been underreported. Where we couldn't build enough things. I mean, we had just so much money stacked up, and we had run out of things to build. This is a civil war. The causes of the civil war go back generations. Building somebody a bridge or a school or a clinic is not going to have them change sides in a civil war that comes down to...
You don't think so?
No.
I mean, because doesn't that help? Doesn't they think, well, you know what? I'm not sure I trust Karzai, but on the other hand, or the Americans, that's for sure. But they did build a nice hospital here.
It's nice, but it's not going to change people's views and their ties to their
Why?
families.
Why doesn't it change their views?
Because it's something deeper than that. And if it had, one of the things people forget or don't realize, the Soviets tried the same thing. The Soviets were brutal and they were horrible in the way they conducted their war. But the Soviets also had upwards of 20,000 civilian advisors in Afghanistan. And they tried the same thing too. They tried to build schools, they built roads, they built cultural centers, and it didn't work for them. This is a generational conflict. This is an assault on people's way of life as they see it. This is the government coming, as one Afghan general said to me, the reason we started the revolution in '78 was because the government came to our villages and asked us what our wives' names were. This is an assault on the most intimate part of their lives as they see it. It's an assault from the outside.
It's a little much, but as you describe it to me, it seems like it's the Republicans in the rural areas and the Democrats in the cities.
There is I've used that red state, blue state comparison before to try and get that across. Of that, this is a thing that comes down to beliefs. It'd be like saying you have a Democratic governor who builds a school in a district hoping to get the people to change their mind on abortion. It's not going to happen.
That's an interesting analogy. That's a good analogy.
We have to think of it in those sense in terms of what would it be, Cenk, if you and I were there, what would we do? If this was our valley, and there's a concept that we call valleyism, and it's nationalism scaled down to a local community level. If you and I were in our valley and foreign troops came into it, what would you and I do? Mm-hmm. And if I was working with those foreign troops, what would you think of me? And for a lot of us, I'm 36, and I grew up watching Red Dawn. I mean, and you got to think of it. Flip that around and put it under perspective.
It's funny you said that because I was also going to quote a movie. When you were saying that, it totally reminded me of Gladiator, where they're about to go conquer the Germans, mm-hmm. the barbarians.
The barbarians, sure.
Right. And the guy next to Maximus says, people should know when they're conquered. And Maximus turns to him and says, "Would you?
Exactly.
Would I?"
Exactly.
Right? And so I get that.
Yeah.
And I get that that's a tough fight.
Yep.
So what broke the camel's back for you, as it were? What made you think, what, not only is this not working, and I think we have trouble here, but I think it's so bad that I'm going to go ahead and resign?
Yeah. What it was I just, like I say in my letter, I had lost confidence that what our guys were dying for was worthwhile, was in the best interest of the United States. And I can't justify their deaths. And if I can't do that, I can't participate in the mission. And it wasn't one thing. It was a series of ongoing things. I guess maybe the Afghan elections themselves were finally the straw that broke the camel's back, as you said. But it was a combination, a continual assessment of both the East and the South on my part, and seeing that our guys are not dying for anything of strategic interest or value to the United States.
Well,
it's not making us safe from Al-Qaeda, our presence there.
One thing you said in another interview that I saw of yours is you said they're fighting us mainly because we're just there, right? And we came into their valley, and so, well, if you're going to come into my valley, I'm going to fight you. So are you convinced, though, that those guys, I'm convinced that they're not Al-Qaeda, right?
Yeah.
That's a totally different game.
Yeah, they're not even Taliban.
But that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Are they Taliban or they're not even Taliban?
They're not even Taliban.
Okay, so explain the difference there.
And this is one of the things that would upset me was I would see a media report about one of our kids being killed and back here, and it would reference that he was killed fighting the Taliban with a capital T. Mm-hmm. And in reality, who he was fighting was exactly that, a local group that just doesn't want anyone in their valley. They don't want the people who are 5 kilometers removed from them in their valley. What you'd see these local groups that would have just their local areas staked out, and they wouldn't interact with each other. They wouldn't coordinate with each other. There was no grand national insurgency there. Yeah, there is a Taliban, the remnants of that regime that we kicked out of power in 2001 in Quetta, and they do have operations running throughout the South, and they do fund these local groups. But that's where the allegiance ends, is in the money, and a desire not to be occupied by foreign power, and also the fact that these are the people who are on one side of a civil war.
See, Matt, I could talk to you all day about this, but I got to probe a little deeper into that, because the problem then is if we withdraw, this is the thought process I'm going through, if we withdraw, the Taliban is going to fund those guys even more, right? And they are going to grow, it appears. And again, correct me anywhere I'm wrong. And then you feel like, well, I get how this was unwinnable, it appears, right? But we're letting go and we're letting the Taliban come back.
Yeah.
and that's a tough thing to reconcile with.
I don't believe that. What I think would happen is it's going to be bloody. It's going to be tragic. But it's going to remain bloody and tragic as long as we're there. I believe those local groups, if we leave, they're not going to line up on the road and march on Kabul. They're going to stay in their valleys. And I think that's the assessment most of us have over there. The Taliban themselves, in order for us to leave, though, we have to ensure that the Taliban do not receive support again from Pakistan. Most of what you read about their seizure of power in the mid-90s, and when you talk to Afghans about this, how did they seize power? Because everyone hates them. How did they seize power then? Well, because of Pakistan. And they really did. They seized power. They took Kabul on the back of Pakistani rupees, on the back of Pakistani money. If we could guarantee that, they won't take power again.
But we still have the same concerns about the Pakistani army and the Pakistani Secret Service or Secret Intelligence.
Yeah.
So do you think that if we left, Pakistan would go back to supporting the Taliban, or no?
No, things have changed. Things have changed. This is not 1995, 96 anymore, where for the most part you saw that Pakistan wanted a stable Afghanistan, and the best way to do it was through the Taliban in order to keep commerce going between Pakistan and the Gulf states. That's kind of one of the theories behind that. But it's not 1995 any longer. It's 2009. I think Pakistan this last year has woken Pakistan up to the existential threat that the Pakistan Taliban present to them. And I don't think there's a connection between the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghan Taliban. There might be some linkage, but there's not any good hard connection.
All right, and then Matt, how do you fight Al-Qaeda if we're not on the ground?
Yeah, we don't need to be on the ground. Again, it's not 2001. Al-Qaeda evolved after 2001. They became like this ideological cloud. They exist on the internet. They recruit worldwide. Their operations are carried out by individual members or small cells that aren't connected to anything. And their leadership doesn't even really, I don't even believe it controls anything. Their leadership is really just figureheads. So we have to evolve too and fight them in a way that makes sense. 60,000 troops on the ground in Afghanistan does nothing to affect Al-Qaeda. It's attacking the fly with the sledgehammer.
So would you do, A, drone attacks, and B, what we did in Somalia, where we sent in the helicopter with special forces and went and got a specific guy?
If it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that guy we got in Somalia has already been replaced. And the comments we say about the drone attacks, the drone attacks are probably counterproductive because they're harassing and scaring the hell out of the Pakistani people. The other thing that drone attacks are those type of surgical strikes. We say this: what's the most dangerous job in Al-Qaeda? Being a number 4 guy. How many mid-level Al-Qaeda guys have we killed over the last 8 years? A lot. And what do? They just promote new mid-level guys. The only guys worth killing in Al-Qaeda right now are Bin Laden, Zawahiri, and that senior level of leadership. And until we kill them, Al-Qaeda is going to be a credible organization.
Well, but the flip side to that is you got to do something. You can't just let that guy sit in Somalia and plan attacks.
Yeah. But you can't expect that to be the answer either. And we have to address the fundamental issues of Al-Qaeda and what their issues are and why they are able to recruit people. But it's such a small organization, though, is the problem too. It's so small. You're talking hundreds of people.
And we're swatting flies with a 68,000 person army.
Yeah.
At least from our end, and you got NATO, and then we're thinking of bringing more troops.
Yep.
So finally, and we're talking to Matt Ho, he was a diplomat for the State Department in Afghanistan. He resigned, a powerful resignation letter that drew the attention of a lot of people, saying that this isn't working. So Obama's going to go make this decision very soon. Obviously, you think if he commits to more troops, it's not going to work. It's just going to take longer and longer. More people are going to die, and then we're going to realize we can't settle this civil war. Do you think there's any chance that Obama says, you know what? No, this isn't working. We got to go. Okay. Not only that, how would he even do that? How would we go? Would we say, you know what? Matt's right. It didn't work. Sayonara?
Yeah. You can't. I mean, you can't wave that magic wand and be gone tomorrow, and you have to withdraw responsibly.
No. I know that. We don't even have to have that discussion. Yeah. But I mean, can he actually say we're going to withdraw rather than maintain our commitment, without putting more troops in? Do you think that that's even a possibility that he could say, no, I'm actually going to withdraw, and it might take 2 years, it might take 5 years, but I'm out of here?
Yeah, I think he will.
You think he will?
I think he will. After yesterday, with the dissent from Ambassador Eikenberry, along with his, kicking back those 4 options back to his staff and asking for an exit strategy, asking for an off-ramp, I think we're going to see that. And hopefully it's a shorter time period than a longer one. Because I really do believe if we don't leave until 2012, 2013, there's going to be no difference between if we had left right now. All we're going to have is more American dead and hundreds of billions of dollars spent that, you and I know we don't have to spend.
No, I know, and we don't have the money that's concerned. Of course, the real problem is politics, because when you say this war is unwinnable and I'm leaving, he is going to catch almighty hell from the Republicans.
And that's what, if I had the opportunity to speak with the president, that's what I'd say. I'd say, hey, Mr. President, this is where great leaders are made, and this is what makes you a great leader of the greatest country in the world, because you have the strength to do this, to make that decision. Knowing full well that, God forbid something happens in the next couple of years, they're going to demonize this and they'll demagogue it. But you're the kind of leader who is not afraid of that and is doing the right thing.
One thing that encourages me is that he's going to the funerals of the soldiers. He's seeing the real consequences. And that's, as he's trying to make that decision, he sees those people showing up in the caskets, and he's got to realize there's got to be a point here. And that's what made me change my mind. If there isn't a point and we can't win, and even if we won, what would that accomplish? When you get to that kind of dead end, you got to go.
I just went to a memorial service last week for a friend of mine last Friday who was killed in Afghanistan a couple weeks ago. And what the hell's the point? What the hell was the point of it?
Yeah, and that's the problem. All right, Matt Ho, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
We really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.